Trump's missteps in the weeks since the Republican convention have given way to criticism from party officials. And as Trump's remarks draw further scrutiny, those with direct knowledge tell CBS News Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort has given up trying to discipline Trump's rhetoric. John Dickerson is host of Face the Nation. So, John, beyond the optics of this apparent disconnect, what is your take on where things really stand within the Trump campaign?
Well, they're at a moment of destabilization, but this is not a new trip to destabilization land. They've been there for a while. The problem is that the clock is ticking. The campaign needs to be operating efficiently on multiple different fronts. The candidate's message needs to be matched with the message in the states. They need to have a ground game operation, and chaos. This is not the time for chaos, in part because not only are they having to figure out how to stay on message, but then they're also missing all these opportunities to hit their opponent. And there are some things that they certainly could be prosecuting against Hillary Clinton.
So what about Trump's running mate, Mike Pence? There are obviously points of disagreement. How important is that for the ticket to essentially be singing from the same song sheet?
So when Mike Pence was picked, I talked to a bunch of Republicans all over the country who had been nervous about Donald Trump. They have been nervous that he is too volatile a candidate. And the word that kept coming up again and again was stabilize. What they thought is that Mike Pence would settle down these eruptions, not only because he was a calming force and he'd been in politics and he kind of knew how to go through this, but it also suggested that Donald Trump had stopped improvising, he'd listened to the advice he'd gotten, and that Pence was a symbol of a new kind of seriousness and discipline from Donald Trump. So in the last few days, what people are saying when I talk to them about what their reaction to all of this is that it shows that that lack of discipline is still there. And that's not only something that worries them about the campaign, but it also worries them about how exciting things would be if he became president.
And John, what do you make of Donald Trump saying he's not quite there yet when it comes to endorsing House Speaker Paul Ryan? I mean, could we really just be seeing an endorsement down the road here in a little bit?
Well, he's parroting the language that Ryan used against him. He remembers that Paul Ryan was a reluctant supporter. Paul Ryan didn't support Mitt Romney right away. Mitt Romney then ultimately picked him as his vice president. What this means, it's not really about the endorsement per se. What it looks like to Republicans who are watching this is Donald Trump's got a long list of things he's got to take care of. He's in the middle of a big presidential campaign. Getting in a spat with Paul Ryan or just sending these signals or paying him back or doing any of those things is not really on the priority list, especially when he just spent 4 days at a convention in Cleveland trying to unify the party. It's an unforced error. And so it's not helpful to him right now.
I wanted to ask you about some of his latest rhetoric in which he talked about a rigged system and talking about the election. In it, I noticed he's folded in this language about potential voter fraud, saying you're going to have people coming in to the vote 10 times. And of course, this is coming on the heels of that federal court in North Carolina basically knocking down the voter ID law. What do you think the strategy is there? Because clearly there are Republicans who are very, very sensitive about this issue and truly believe that voter ID is necessary to prevent voter fraud.
Well, I think it's a motivation strategy. In other words, if you're a Republican out there, the other side's trying to trick you, sneak in, steal the election, so you better be vigilant. You better fight hard. That's one way. That's one point. That's one thing it does. The other thing it does is if the outcome isn't one he wants, he says it's a rigged election, and and it's a destabilizing claim that in this regard gets his team back kind of focused. In other words, this is on the song sheet of some Republicans, which is that it's that these voter ID laws are necessary, and if you needed a driver's license you should need a driver's license to be able to vote. And so this is something that's actually in terms of the lack of discipline, this is actually something that would fit into a slightly more disciplined message because it's been a concern for some Republicans.
All right, let's talk about Hillary Clinton because she has been out there, her campaign, watching all of this from afar. What do you make of how she's sort of handled all of this turmoil on the Republican side?
Well, mostly, the old adage, if your opponent is shooting themselves in the foot, don't get in the way. There's been a lot of that. There's been some comments when Donald Trump criticized the Khan family or Mrs. Khan, she said, I don't know what the bottom is. There have been comments here and there, but really what she's been trying to do is focus on sending her economic message, which is basically trying to undermine Trump's strength, which is as a businessman and a change and a sort of vessel of change or a candidate of change. it's going to be on the economy that he makes his case to voters. And what she's trying to do is basically undermine that case by saying, you may think he's with you, but in his private work, in his private companies, they've outsourced and they've made products overseas, so he's not on the level with you. This is her diligent attempt, as she goes state to state, speech by speech, to undermine his best selling point.
All right. John Dickerson, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.